So any question about the schedule? Okay, so in case you haven't got the file for these last two sessions topics, I just send you the slides through WhatsApp. Okay, so you can use it during the class. Okay, so let me start with the session. So I hope Pak Wawan already finished the explanation about the fundamental of solid particles. So at least you should know at this point about the definition of Reynolds number, particle Reynolds number, and then the terminal velocity, the velocity at which the particle starts to move. So we will talk about the application for now. So maybe we'll talk about some gravity settling or some filtration, membrane separation, and lastly is about the fluidization. Okay, so hopefully we can finish this part in about 3 hours class. Okay, let me check the Teams first. Okay, so it's already being recorded. Okay, so the first application of the particles in fluid mechanics is about gravity settling chamber. So this is the illustration. So you can imagine that you have air or gas that contains some solid particles, impurities, for example. Hold a minute. So yep, that's the gas with a solid. The solid could be as a impurities, for example. So maybe the application is you can imagine like a coal power generation, for example. Coal power generation before the flue gas, the emission will be emitted to the atmosphere. Maybe it still contains some solid particles. The solid particle itself could be dust, could be small grain of coal, for example. But it cannot be directly emitted to the atmosphere because of its toxicity, for example. So it will be separated in a settling chamber. Okay, so if you heard a term called settling, that means it's just a separation based on gravity. Okay, it's a physical separation. We don't really have any chemical things involved in this process, purely physical separation. And you can imagine over here that's the solid, the row of the solid that must be much higher than the density of the gas. Okay, and because of the higher density of the solid, it will settle. That's why it's called settling. So it will settle to the bottom due to the gravitational force. So it will be separated at the bottom of this chamber. Okay, so in this one, so you can now imagine that it's a cleaner gas. Okay, so it's a cleaner gas and contains a small amount of particles. Okay, why I said it as cleaner gas, because it may not be a completely clean gas. Okay, so what do you think will happen if now the solid contains of a different size distributions? Okay, let's say now the particles, there are particles with 1 micrometer diameter. There will be some 5 micrometer, there will be some 10 micrometer particles, all of them combined, so that's the particle of the diameter. How do you think it will affect this settling chamber? Which one will be separated first? Which one will be separated first?
Is it the one with 10 millimeters, sir?
Yeah, so the bigger the particles, it tends to be easier to drop, right? Because it's heavier in terms of the force in the particles. So that's the bigger particle will tends to first to drop. Okay, but we can imagine that uh, did depends on how long this chamber is. Okay, so depends on how long the chamber is. The longer the chamber, then the likelier all of the particles can be settled and separated. But if we didn't design it properly, then you just can imagine that the solid doesn't have necessary time to drop, so it will still be contained in the gas side. Okay, because let's say it's a very short chamber, like less than 1 meter, for example, and it blows in a quite fast velocity. They don't have time to settle. Okay, so please start to imagine that the diameter of the particle has a very significant role in determining the characteristics of this fluid particles flow. Okay, so that's why now we have to think about the balance of the force, and as an engineer later you will have to be able to decide how long the chamber should be. Okay, would 10 meter be enough? Would 5 meter be enough? Would 20 meter be enough? And so on. Okay, so again, in terms of the variables, I don't think there's nothing new over here. It's a Q. Q means volumetric flow rate, so it's in cubic meter per second or cubic meter per hour, so cubic meter per time basis. Okay, and L is length, H is height, W is width. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Length, height, and that's the width. Okay, now we can predict the dimension of the chamber required to separate the particles. Okay, any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay, let's move on into the next slide. So in terms of the settling of the particles have to drop the height and move along the length of the chamber. Okay, so again, if we say that that's the length of the chamber and that's the height of the chamber, now we need to think about the residence time. Okay, particles have to drop the height of h and move along the length, and start to think about the residence time. That means will 10 seconds be enough for the particle to drop? Okay, if you think that 10 seconds would be enough for the particles to drop, then we just have to design the chamber in such a way that the residence time of the particle is higher than those number. Okay, we provide enough time for the particle to settle. Okay, because if we don't provide enough time, then maybe let's say we the dimensions of the chamber. Now instead of those long L, now that's the new L. They don't have time to settle. So the particles suddenly already exits the chamber and it will not be separated. Okay, that's why it's important for us to know what will be the necessary length of the chamber. Okay, so in terms of the calculation, it's actually very straightforward, much simpler compared to the pressure drop in the pipeline system, for example. Okay, it's very straightforward. So you can see that the average fluid velocity is calculated using the formula UF. That means it's already in meter per second. That can be calculated based on the volumetric flow rate. So in terms of the units, that coming from meter cubic per second divided by square meter. So meter per second comes from volumetric flow rate divided by the area of the flow. Okay, so the square meter is the width and multiply by the height. Okay, because, well, if we look at this as 3 dimensions, so let's say that z, that, well, no, I think that's okay, x, y, z. So what we have as a q is actually velocity in the z direction, right? To the length of, let's say it's to the z direction. So the area that's relevant to the calculation of the linear velocity is actually the x and y. So now you can imagine that's the area. So if we make it as a hold on, if we make it as a 3-dimensional chamber, so that's the 3-dimensional chamber. So that's the area that we are talking about. Because again, once we have the cubic meter per second over here, and then we divide it by the area, the width times the height, then what we get is the linear velocity in the z direction. Okay, so that's hopefully understandable. And the average time needed, so average time needed to flow along L, once we know the meter per second of the flow. Okay, so that's what I recently called as a residence time. Okay, that's the residence time. So let's say you have 10 cubic meter per second. Okay, let's say you have 10 cubic meter per second, and then you know that the width times the height is 10 meter square. Okay, that tells you that the velocity is actually 1 meter per second. Okay, and once we know that the length, let's say now let's say that the length of the chamber is 10 meter, for example. Once we know that the UF is 1 meter per second, so it's now very straightforward that the times required to flow across the chamber is 10 meter times 1 meter per second, which is 10 seconds. Okay, so based on the numbers that I gave to you as an example, that's the UF, that's the length of the chamber. So the particles will flow across the chamber in about 10 seconds. So in this case, if we want to separate those particles, we have to ensure that the particle will settle less than 10 seconds. Okay, if we can make sure that the particle will settle less than 10 seconds, then that's going to happen. Let's say now the particle settles at 8 seconds, they will go and then settles before it reach the end of the chamber. If the settling time is only 1 second, then maybe that will happen. They will enter the chamber and then directly drop because of its bigger particle, for example. But now if the problem is if we have a particle that have a settling time more than 10 seconds, then it will just go straight to the chamber and settles outside of the chamber, which is not what we intended to do. Okay, so again, the average time needed to flow in terms of the fluid flow. Okay, we're talking about the fluid here, not necessarily talking about the particles. Okay, it's about the overall bulk of the fluid. It can be calculated as times as L per UF, which can be simplified as width times height times length per Q. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions?
All good so far, sir.
Okay, so now we talk about the fluid, so now let's talk about the solid, okay, the particles. If the particles falls with a settling velocity of UP, so UP is U particle, velocity of the particle, the subscript means the particle. The time required for every H is equal to the, so let's go back first to the previous slide, okay? You can see that that's the H. That's why is it called H? Because that's we're talking about the horizontal motions. Okay? We're talking about the horizontal motions, assuming that the chamber flows in the horizontal directions. So 10 seconds required to flow across the horizontal dimensions of this chamber. Now we're talking about the vertical. Okay, if we're talking about the vertical, so we're talking about the settling. Okay, we're talking about the settling. Because we didn't design the chamber so that the fluid will goes into the vertical directions. Okay, so again, it's a very straightforward calculations in terms of the time required to settle. It simply can be calculated as height per U particle. Okay, so again, if we're talking, that's the Q, that's the length. Okay, that's the height. Now, in order to drop, height is the height of the chamber, and UP is the U particle, and that's actually a function of the particle diameter. Okay, the bigger the particle, the velocity will be different. So that's when the size of the particles take into account into these calculations. Okay, so now we can imagine a different type of particle. Okay, starting from point A, so let's say that's point A and that's point B. Then in order to perfectly settle, okay, perfectly settled mean we have a same time. By the time it reaches the ends of the channel, the particles completely settles. Then TH will be the same with T vertical. Okay, so that's assuming perfectly settled at the end of the chamber. Okay, perfectly settles at end of chamber. Okay, and we already know the formula to calculate each variables. So again, it's already written actually in the slide that TH, the horizontal, is equal with T vertical, or the width times height times length per Q is equal to height per UP. Okay, and so now we can simplify. We WHL per Q is equal to H per U particles. Okay, so that's can be simplified. Now the UP is actually Q per width per length. For the size that perfectly settles at the end of the chamber. Okay, and again, this can be linked with the explanation that Pak Wawan explained in the last sessions about the Reynolds particles, about the terminal velocity, and so on. So now we can calculate the UP from two different perspective, from two different formula. Okay. Any questions so far before we go into the exam? Okay, all good then. Again, now we know the UP calculation based on the dimension of the chamber. Okay, based on the chamber dimension perspective, and it has to be matched, okay, with the UP from the calculation of the Reynolds particle, okay, or the diameter of the particle. So now we can depending on the calculation, so UP is equal to UP, for example, so the Q per WL has to be equal with the UP calculation based on the Reynolds calculations. Using those information later on, then we will be able to decide what will be the required width and length of the chamber. Okay, because everything else at the right side of the equation should be known. Once we know the size of the particles, the physical properties of the fluid, then everything in the right side equation will be provided, right? So again, this is the continuation from Pak Wawan's slide. We has to check the Reynolds of the particles. Okay, so rho the times the U times the particle of diameter divided by the viscosity of the fluid. It will be if it's laminar, then that's the formula. We can calculate the UP based on the dimension and based on the particle characteristics. And if the particle is known, if the density is known, if the viscosity is known, then we can decide on the dimension. Or the other way around. Okay, that means, let's say we have a fixed dimension of the chamber. We know that the chamber is certain meter. Okay, then we can calculate what would be the minimum particle diameter that can be separated. Above those diameter, then it will not be separated using the specified chamber. Okay, so yeah, I think that's just the follow-up, the derivation of the formula. The dP remains in the left side while the other formula goes to while the other variables goes into the right side equation. So it's dP square, so that's why we have square root of the 18 mu Q per GWL delta rho. That's the minimum, right? That's the minimum particle that can be separated. Okay, so yep, let's apply those concept. Okay, please do this exercise. We know that's the Q. Okay, that's the Q. That's the temperature. I don't think we will need those information, but that's the L, that's the W, that's the height, and then that's the rho particle, to be precise. That's the rho of the fluid. That's the mu of the fluid. Okay. Estimate the smallest particle diameter that can be separated and check whether the particle flow is consistently laminar. Okay. Okay, so actually it can be solved very quickly because we already know that this is the derivation that recently explained in the previous slides, which is coming from the perspective of the size of the particle and also coming from the perspective of the dimension of the chamber. Okay, we just need to put the value. Okay, we just need to put the value directly into the equations. So that's a constant. That's the mu in Pascal second. Okay, make sure everything is in SI unit to be consistent. So that's Pascal second. That's the Q. It must be in cubic meter per second. That must be in Pascal second. That's the gravity constant, meter per second square. That's the width of the chamber. That's the length of the chamber. That's the delta rho in kilogram per cubic meter. Okay, we put everything into the calculation. So now we know that the diameter particle that can be separated will be 1.529 times. Okay, so maybe I will simplify this as 15.29 micrometer. If you have a particle with 15.29 micrometer, then it will perfectly settle at the end of this channel. Okay, perfectly settles at the end of this channel. So what do you think it will happen now if you have a diameter particle of 10 micrometer and a diameter particle of 20 micrometer? Which one is, so let me draw a different line. So let's say that's case A, that's B, and now I have another line C. Okay, so which one is the characteristic of the smaller particle, the 10 micrometer? Will it be the B or the C one? Will it be separated or entrained? Okay, 10 micrometer, it's smaller. It's smaller than the boundary, right? So that's the boundary is 15.29. So it's smaller than the boundary. So will it be easier or will it be harder to settle?
Harder to settle, sir.
So it will be harder to settle. So we call it entrained. Okay, so we call it entrainment. Okay, so that means the particle will still be entrained to the fluid flow. Okay, while the 20 micrometer that will behave in the B illustrations, because actually the time requires to settle is less than the residence time inside of the chamber. Okay, and lastly, we just need to confirm that we use the correct formula. Why? Because this formula is only applicable for laminar. Okay, that's only applicable for laminar. If it's turbulent, I think the derivation will be a bit complicated. Hopefully Pak Wawan already explained to you about the U particle calculation. So check Pak Wawan slide. What if the Reynolds is above 0.2 and it reached the turbulence? Okay, but the concept is the same. Okay, the concept is you put the UP is equal to UP. The right side is the Q per WL. So the left side, if it's turbulent, then you find what would be the equation applicable for turbulence. And then you just put the number, then you get the diameter required. But in this case, because we want to use the laminar regimes calculations, then you just need to make sure that once you put all the numbers, the Q, the W, the L, the rho, the dP, the mu, everything is inserted into this equation, then you still get that the particles Reynolds is 0.019, which is smaller than the laminar's limit. Okay, any questions? It's all good?
All good, sir.
Okay, so let's move on into the next application. Okay, that's it for settling. We just need 20 to 30 minutes to talk about this because it's hopefully very simple. Okay, so now we move on into the second application, which is a filtrations. Okay, I think I will have a couple of video to help you to visualize how the filtration works. Okay, so again, it's to separate a solid from a particle. Okay, it's to separate a solid from a particles, but not using the gravity settling. Okay, if it's a filtration, there must be some filter. Okay, there must be some filter that has a certain pore. Okay, pore size. Okay, that has a certain pore size. So let's say if you have, I don't know if some of you like to make a coffee. Okay, let's say you have a coffee maker, and then you have, let's say, a bowl. So you already grind the coffee beans. You already grind the coffee beans, so now it's already as a powder. Okay, it's already becomes a coffee powder, and then you fill in with the water, and then it will be mixed. Okay, it will be mixed, but you don't want to drink the 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 coffee grounds. Okay, so let's say you have some coffee machine, or you have some filtration. Okay, so some AeroPress or any other type of coffee machine. Okay, the principle is, now you insert a layer, a filter, let's say a sheet. Okay, maybe a sheet, and sheet has a very specific pore size. Let's say now the pore size of the filter is 1 micrometer. Okay, and then you put the filter over here. Okay, so now that's the filter. Now you can imagine that, let's say that's 1 micrometer. If we can make sure that the coffee ground size particle is bigger than 1 micrometer. Okay, so if the coffee is bigger than 1 micrometer, then you can perform the filtration perfectly. Okay, why? Because now what you have at the bottom here is only like the liquid coffee. Okay, extracted coffee without any beans. Okay, and all the beans itself, or all the coffee ground itself, will be stuck at the filter, because the coffee bean is bigger than the size of the pore. Right? So you just, as long as you put enough pressure for the liquid to flow across the filter. Okay, now you can get the liquid coffee without any coffee beans or coffee grounds. Okay, so that's like the very easy illustration or example of filtrations. So the key point here is, okay, some of the key point here is, of course, you need to know the size of the particle. You need to know the size of the particle, then you can decide the size of the filter pore. But don't forget, if you left it without any external force, you can imagine that the filter starts to accumulate. You can imagine that the coffee bean, the coffee ground starts to accumulate, and let's say it will plug the pore of the filter. Okay, so even in a not traditional, so in a small but quite modern coffee shop, they will push the mixture, right? They will push by hand, by machine, or anything. It will be pushed, so there will be some force or pressure, okay, or simply a pressure. We put some force, it will provide some pressure, okay, because maybe it will stuck if we don't provide enough pressure. Okay, so that's like some simple example that I can give to you about the filtrations. Okay, so we know that's our filter over here. Let's now try to imagine this application in a bigger scale and in industrial scale. A lot of this is used in environmental purpose. Okay, so for wastewater treatment, we don't want to emit the mud or the metal into the river, so it has to be filtered, for example. Okay, so we have the sludge, and then we have the filter. We just need to provide a necessary pressure so that now the filtrate, okay, so that's the term, okay, the filtrate liquid that goes through the filter media. So now we get the filtrate over here. Okay, we get the filtrate while the built up accumulated solid at the filter, that's what is called as the cake. Okay, solid above the filter media that cannot penetrate into the filtrate side. Okay, any questions first about the definitions or the illustration of the filtrations? Okay, so in terms of the calculations, so now again, we chemical engineers would like to automate the process as much as possible. Okay, we want to leave it, engineer would like to leave it to the operator would like to leave it to the machine. So the operator can just stay at the control room, drinking coffee and rest. Okay, but we want to automate it. So now we have to think about the automation. Okay, what is the how should I supply the feed? Okay, how should I supply the feed? And then how big the filter has to be, and then how often do I have to clean the filter? Because you can also imagine that this is intermittent process. That means it's not a completely steady state process. Okay, in the initial step of the operation, we will not have a cake, so the filter will be clean. Okay, and then we left it to be operated 24 hours non-stop. Let's say after 3 months, it starts to build up. Okay, more and more cake will be formed at the filter side. Okay, more and more cake will be accumulated at the filter side. That's very logical. That's the consequence of this process. Okay, so once in a while we have to clean this. Once in a while we have to clean this part so it becomes clean again and can be used for a filtration quite easily. So before we go into the calculation, there are also two different types of the flow mechanisms. Okay, that's the first option, the conventional dead end filtration, which is shown in the previous slide, the previous illustration. I think that's the conventional dead end filtration because the liquid flows perpendicular to the filter. Okay, so that's the filter, that's the direction of the flow. Okay, and it will form solid in the filter surface, so it will build up along the way. Okay, but actually now we start to improvise, we start to innovate. How can we minimize this solid build up? How can we minimize this accumulations? Okay, and it actually can be solved most of the time using the second options by flowing the filtration in the cross tangential directions. Okay, so now the liquid flows is in the same direction as the filter, and it will reduce the formation of the solids. So hopefully the next picture will help you to visualize those processes. Okay, so that's the dead end, conventional dead end. Okay, conventional dead end. That's the dead end, and that's the tangential. Okay, and this is actually like the default configuration for a membrane now. Okay, so if some of you already learn about membrane, which is like the state-of-the-art technology to purify water. Okay, so for chemical engineers, it's really important for us to understand about the principle of membrane. Okay, because it's used in a water treatment industry. Okay, so if you think how Singapore is able to provide drinking water for their populations. I don't know the population, maybe 3, 4, 5 millions or above, but they don't have any clean reservoir. Okay, it's a small island without any natural spring water. Okay, how can they provide a water treatment for their peoples? It's actually from a sea. Okay, it's actually from a sea, seawater, and the seawater will be will goes to membrane. Okay, so that's the membrane. So that's the seawater, and then we have clean drinking water. Okay, and salt is rejected. So that's the rejected salt and other minerals. Okay, that's why it's really emerging technology that continue to be used in bigger applications. Okay, so in Middle East they use also this kind of membrane separation, I think, to provide the clean water for their population. So but you can imagine then I'm not talking about the coffee filtrations, so we're talking about membrane process to provide millions of people drinking water. The size of the equipment is very big, and we can't let the solid to be accumulated very quickly. Then we have to refill the membrane in a very short frequency time. Okay, so that's why now we're talking about the tangential configurations, because what happens now, you have the seawater, for example. If we use this example, okay, we have the seawater as a feed, and the retentate, that will be the rejected salt. Okay, that's actually the rejected salt. Rejected salt. What we have as a permeate is actually the clean water. That's the drinking water. Okay. So again, the membrane is a filtration process. It's the fancy filtration process. Okay. So what we have over here, that's the membrane. That's the membrane that has a certain pore size. You will get some microfiltration membrane. Microfiltration membrane, that means the order of the pore size will be in the order of -6 meter. You will have some ultrafiltration membrane that has a smaller size. You will have RO, reverse osmosis membrane. Maybe it's in the order of nanometer in terms of the pore size. So again, the smaller the pore size, the harder it is for the particles to goes into the membrane filtration systems. Okay, so we can imagine that if we have a RO, reverse osmosis membrane, that has a very small pore size, of course it's able to produce drinking water directly. So it's not only for cleaning purpose, not for bathroom or for take a shower. Okay, it's perfectly safe to be used as a drinking water directly, because at this small particle, at this small size, there will be no microbes. There will be you can check the Googles. Okay, what is the particle diameter of microbes? Okay, it's actually less than this nanoparticles. So that's like the biggest application of a membrane, I think, nowadays. And the idea here again, it's not perpendicular. Okay, if we go back into this previous slide, the liquid flows in the same direction as the filters. Okay, so it's not perpendicular, such as found in the dead end filtration. So if we imagine that that's the direction of the retentate. Retentate is the dirty one. Okay, the rejected salt one. Rejected salt will continuously remove the solid. Okay, it is sent outside of the membrane. So that's why, of course, we will have some solid form in the as a cake in the filter of the membrane, but most of the time the retentate still rejects, still flows, solid will still exits the membrane. So not all of the solid will be accumulated. Okay, the clean water, of course, we will get it continuously. The retentate will be rejected continuously. So most of the solid will be rejected continuously. Okay, so you can see in terms of the profile as a function of time, if we have the dead end filtration, we don't have any channel for the cake to exit the membrane. So of course, over the time, it will gradually increase. Okay, it will gradually increase up until the moment that we don't have enough flux. Okay, that's the flux. Flux means the permeate side. Okay, the filtrate side. Up at one point, maybe at this point, the cake completely clog and plug the filter. Okay, completely clog and plug the filter. So there cannot be any permeate goes to the bottom, even though we put enough pressure. That's very common to be observed in this kind of filtration. So what happens at this point? Then we have to clean the membrane, open the filtration, clean it, remove the dirt, remove the cake, so it can be revert back to the original characteristics. Okay, but the difference here is in the tangential process, it will settle up until certain time. Okay, initially there will be some cake forms, which is shown in this picture. Okay, which is shown in this picture. That's the initial times when the cake, a thin layer of cake form at the filter. But up until it reaches certain point, it will not continually increase the thickness of the cake. Okay, at this point, the cake thickness becomes relatively stable, and the flux will become relatively stable as well. Okay, so it has a longer time of operations before it has to be cleaned. Okay, any questions?
It's all good, sir.
Okay, so hopefully now you can answer if someone asks you what's the advantage and disadvantages of dead end versus tangential configurations. Okay, it's has everything to do with the particle build up. So I think if you draw this graph and then explain it, it's almost sum up the main characteristics of the dead end versus filtration. So over the time, you will get a longer operation of the membrane. You will get a stable flux. Okay, so the lifetime of the membrane will be longer and so on. Okay, it just requires I would say harder fabrications techniques. Okay, so because for the conventional type of membrane, I think it's easier to fabricate or to produce this kind of filter. So you just stack one by one the filter without any complex techniques. But now if we're talking about a membrane, it's almost like a pasta actually. Okay, if you Google membrane tube, okay, it's almost like a pasta. Why? Because you can imagine that for a small membrane, reverse osmosis, the pore is actually in nanometer size. Okay, so it's a very, very small thin layer, but the length could be like above 1 meter. So it's not as easy to be produced. Okay, but it's doable. And actually, I think I don't know if some of you notice All of you are chemical engineers, right? So I think one of the most prominent professor in chemical engineer, the most prominent chemical engineer in professor in chemical engineer is actually the expert in this membrane separation and recognized worldwide, not only nationally but recognized worldwide. And he is your vice rector, okay, vice rector in research and innovations. So he has a big lab. He has even a factory, okay, a factory to produce this membrane in Cimahi. So yeah, we have the capability to produce this kind of technology. So far. Okay, so if no, then we go into the calculation of filtrations. In terms of the calculations, it follows the Darcy law. Okay, it follows the Darcy law because again I don't know. I'm sorry that this one can be neglected. Okay, that's left out. It follows the Darcy laws where the characteristic of liquid through a porous bed can be modeled. Okay, so it's coming. So that's the Darcy law. 1 per A dV per dt is equal to delta P per mu R. Okay, and V, that's the filtrate volume. Filtrate is the clean side. Okay, the clean side. And then time, because it's not a completely steady state operations. Okay, we already talked about this before, that it has a function of time. Gradually it starts to build up, gradually the flux may change. Filtration area, okay, that's I think very straightforward. That's like the area covered by the filter. Pressure difference, okay, so again if I draw it over here, so depending on the shape of this container, it can be cylindrical, it can be rectangular, doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's the filtrate part. That's the filtrate part. And the pressure difference, so that's the pressure difference, right? The differential pressure between the feed and the filtrate side. Because the driving force, some of the driving force is the delta pressure. If you don't have enough pressure, then it will stuck at the filter side. It cannot go through the small hole. And mu, I think that's very straightforward. That's the viscosity of the filtrate. And R is the overall resistance. Okay, R is of overall resistance, which can be break down into two main compounds. So R is overall resistance, which can be separated as media resistance and the cake resistance. Okay, why? Again, so let's say now that's the cake. The blue circle is the cake accumulated. So if we send a feed, into a filter, then there will have some resistance to go through this initial cake. Okay, even before reaching the filter media, it has to be able to flow across the accumulated cake. Okay, so the blue one, that's the RC, okay, the accumulated cake, while the green one, that's the membrane filter. The smaller the size, it's cleaner, but it provides a higher resistance. Okay, sorry. So yeah, so if let's call it pore size. Okay, If the pore size is smaller, then the resistance of the cake will be higher. Okay? But the filter rate will be cleaner. Filter rate will be cleaner. The filter rate will be cleaner. So yeah, that's the initial illustration of this formula that is used for the calculations. Okay, 1 per A dV dt is equal to delta P per mu R. Okay, so and we have two options. Okay, to express these correlations. So previously it was stated that 1 per A dV per dt is equal to delta P per mu R. Okay, initially it was stated that way. Okay, and R is Rm plus Rc. Now the Rc can be calculated based on this empirical equation. Okay, don't ask how to derive it. It's based on experiment, empirical equations. Alpha is the constant. Rho C, that's the density of the cake. V per A, that's the accumulated filtrate volume divided by the area of the membrane. Okay, so you can also imagine that the longer the time, the more and more cake accumulated, and RC becomes higher and higher. Okay, and once we combine this R part, it can be derived that now the characteristic of the filtrations can be modeled using these correlations. 1 per A dV dt, it's still delta P, mu 0, it's just that's the RC is break it down into the RC. Okay, and then by substituting and then move to the simplifying these equations, you can directly use these correlations. V per A is equal to the cake part, so that's the cake part. That's the cake part, that's the membrane part, membrane resistance part. Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, then there is a second way to express these correlations. So if you can put a note that the slide 17 and slide 18 is not directly correlated. Okay, so it's just an option for you depending on the input that you know. Okay, if the problem provides you the number directly in the delta P, in the membrane resistance, in the cake resistance, then you can simply use this correlation. Okay, you don't need the equation that will be provided in slide 18, but sometimes it is expressed differently. So, but it has the same functions. Okay, it's just a different input. Sometimes it's not stated directly as the resistance. Okay, so sometimes it will be stated as the permeability of the solid filtrated, which is expressed as kappa. If the input is provided not as a resistance but as a kappa, then slide 18 should be the one that you use. Okay, so now yep, the left side equation is actually the same, 1 per A dV dt. It's just difference in the right side equations. So it's not expressed in directly in the Darcy law. Okay, so the delta p part is still the same. I think Darcy law has a delta p, but maybe that's the different parts, the kappa per mu L. It tells you the same thing, just expressed in a different variables. Okay, it's expressed as a permeability. Then you just simply need to use this correlation if that's the one required. 1 per A dvdt is equal to delta P kappa A per alpha mu V. Okay, and again L. So that's the link. That's the linkage between the previous slide. Length of the filter is actually alpha, which is another constant, the constant that is used in the previous equation as well, which is a function of V per L, and multiplied by the volume of the filtrate divided by the filter area. Okay, and then you simplified everything. Now you get 1 per A dvdt is equal to delta P, and dvdt itself is equal to delta P kappa square alpha per alpha mu 1 per V. Okay. Any questions? Okay, let me continue first. So hopefully you will understand once we go to the exercise. So I will start by writing the previous formula in the previous slide. dvdt is equal to delta P kappa square A per alpha mu 1 per V. Okay, so that's the initial equations. So now you have two options on how you want to operate this filter. Okay, do you want to perform at constant delta P? Okay, the first one is constant delta P. Or do you want to perform at constant flow velocity? Okay, you can't have both. Okay, you can't have both constant pressure and constant volumetric flow velocity. That's just not feasible. Okay, why? Just look at the equations. Okay, if you let's start with the first option. If you want a constant delta P, then this become a constant. Kappa is a constant. A square is a constant. Alpha is a constant. Mu is a constant. So the consequence of a constant pressure is you have a function, a volume as a function of time. Okay, you will not be able to get a constant volumetric flow rate. So the logical things here is, if we keep the same delta pressure in those two sides of the filter, the longer the time, the cake will start to accumulate. The resistance will be bigger and bigger. Okay, and if the resistance is become bigger and bigger, later we will get a smaller volume of the filtrate. Okay, so that's why you can see that from the initial equations. Now, if we assume to be a constant delta P, that's a constant delta P, right? Constant delta P, and the dt is sent to the right-hand equation, and everything else is to the left side equations. So now you get alpha mu per kappa square A integral V dV is equal to delta P integral dt. Okay. So that's the part that it's changing over the time. Volume will change over the time as a function of time. So the simplification or the derivation of this formula is now if we focus, so V dV that becomes half of square V, right? Starting from 0 to V, final V. So by substituting, because it's an integral VdV, right? So it's become half of the square V. So the filter rate of the volume now can be simplified or can be calculated using this equation. And you can see that delta P is constant, A is constant, kappa is constant, alpha is constant, but there will be time. Okay, there will be time constant here. So of course the time will not be constant. So at T equals 0, there will be no filter rate because we haven't flowed the feed, so we haven't get the product. Then you can imagine what happens at T equal to 10, what happens at T equal to 100, right? The volume of the filter rate, of course, will continue to increase over the time in this order. Okay, so it's not directly proportional, so it's the delta P and order of 0.5 that is correlated with the volume of the filter rate and the time as well. The second option is now if you want to choose to have a constant flow velocity. Okay, you want to have a constant volumetric flow velocity. You want to have a constant cubic meter per second. Okay? That's doable, but you have the consequence. Okay. Again, now imagine this equation goes to this part. In the second part, the second option part, you want to have a constant cubic meter per second. And actually, dV per dt is cubic meter per second, right? Differential in volume is cubic meter, differential in time is second. So the idea here is you want to have a constant dV per dt, which is known as a debit. Okay, dV per dt is a debit. If you want to have a constant debit, cubic meter per second, that's okay, but the consequence is you have to provide this delta P. Okay, you have to provide this delta P because now the simplification would be Q is equal delta P kappa square A alpha mu 1 per V. Okay. Because the dV per dt is equal to Q. So the delta Q is equal to that one. Okay. And you will also notice, okay, you will also notice that it's not a certainty that we can provide a constant delta P. Why? Again, you see that this is directly proportional with time. Okay, over the time, we need a bigger pressure drop because over the time, the resistance may build up and so on. Okay. Yep. So that's so in terms of the exercise, later on you just need to see the questions, okay? Whether it is asked to be operated at constant pressure drop or constant flow velocity. If it's operated at constant velocity, then you simply can use this equation without deriving from the initial Darcy equations. And then you can provide what would be the profile of the delta P as a function of time necessary to perform the required task. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, before we go to the exercise, to make you a better example, I give you a better understanding about the calculation. I will give a transition time for your brain to slow down a little bit. Okay, so this is an example of the filters, and I will have a short video about how it works. So again, it's commonly used in any chemical plant that has a solid. Okay, you're talking about a cement plant, you're talking about a coal plant, you're talking about polymer plant has some solid in it. Okay, or waste treatment plant you will find this kind of equipment in those plate. Okay, plate and frame filter. So I'm not sure if you already know about plate and frame heat exchanger before, maybe in the introduction of chemical engineering, but certainly in the next semester you will learn about it in the heat transfer. So it consists of a lot of frame. So you can see that that's the plate, that's the frame. Okay, and there will be some channel in between the plate. Okay, that's where the clean fluid, clean water flows. Okay, while the cake, the solid will be stuck at the center of the filter. Okay, that's the cake. It will be stuck. So that's the first one before I go to the video. Okay, the second one is the rotary. Okay, it's a rotary filter. It's also very common. So now you can imagine that that's the feed, and then it will be absorbed. It will goes through the clean one. The clean one will goes through the filter. So the filter is built in this cylindrical shape. Okay, but maybe if it's zoom and then reverse, maybe you can imagine that you have some very small filter, something like that. Okay, so if you have a clean water without containing a small particle, it can go through the small hole. Okay, the blue one is a small hole, and if it goes through the small hole, then it can go through the inner part of this filter, which is the concentrated clean part. While the cake, of course, it will be accumulated at the outer part of the filtration, at the outer part of the filter. So that's why now you have a cake as the yellow cake over here, because it cannot go through the small hole in the filter. And the cake will be helped by and washed by water so that it becomes like a slurry, not completely like dust. Okay, once it becomes a slurry, it's easier to be sent. So now you have a knife, for example, to cut down those remaining cakes. Okay. Okay, I think I'll go to the video first. Okay, which one? Filter press. Okay, can you hear the voice? The sound of the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, we actually can't hear the voice right now. There's no sound.
There is no sound? Okay. Don't worry, it's just a background sound. They haven't talked anything, so. Maybe just look at the flow. Okay, so that's the dirty water. That's water containing some solid fraction in it. And you can imagine that there will be some channel in between the plates. Okay, so now look at it has to be pressurized, right? It has to be pressurized to remove additional liquid. Because if it's pressurized, then you can imagine that the middle of this plate that will consist of a lot of small pores. If the hole is small enough, then the dirt cannot be flow across the plate. Okay, it will surface of the plate. Okay, it will stuck over here, but the water, the clean water, can go straight into the plate. Okay, That's why you can see that there is some small channel over here. That's where the clean water will goes into the next plate. And if it's not pressurized, then it will stuck. Okay, I think this is a quite good illustration because the water can goes through the plate, then in between the channel, you can recover all the clean water. Okay, you can recover all the clean water as your product, while the cake will still be stuck at the plate. Okay, and then once the filter press are full with the cake, there is no more room for cake, then it's time for regeneration. It's time to stop the filtration process and time to recover the cake from the surface of the plate. Okay, and then the plates will be open. Okay, see at the bottom. Okay, see at the bottom over here. That's where the cakes will be disposed. So I think that sums up the process quite clearly. It may not be as automatic as this video. Okay, yeah, you will find some filtration that has a lot of manual operations. Like during the cleaning process, there will be some workers, okay, labor who will bring some knife or any other tools to remove the dirt, the cake manually from the plate. Uh, there are a lot of manual filtrations, so it's not supplied by the compressed air, by the uh, pneumatic, but it's actually like by the human who works those dirty works. Okay, any questions about the plate and frame before we go into the second video? No questions?
No, sir.
Okay, then let's go to the second filter. Okay, it's actually longer, so I will have to skip some of the parts. Okay. Okay, so that's the cake that cannot goes through the inner part of the cylinder because it's stuck with the small hole. And that's actually the knife. Okay, that's the knife. So that the solid can be separated. Okay, so that's the knife. So that's the washing. Okay, now you get the solid. Okay, so that's the clean part, the filtrate part. You can see that it's high clarity. Okay, sometimes it still has to be maintained. So the cake part is removed and cleaned, but in a less frequent time compared to the filter press filter. Okay, let me check. Okay, I think that's it. Rest are just promotion video. Okay, any questions about this equipment? So that's the cake continuously removed from the system. So the build up is not as much as the filter press. And then the clean part is actually inside of this cylinder. Okay, that's collected in the header of the filtrate parts. Any questions? No? Okay, let's move on into the exercise. Again, usually I want the students to do this exercise directly, but unfortunately the time is very limited because we're already in the week 14. So at least the course is recorded. So if you later want to practice by yourself in your home, you can always refer it back to the record. Okay. So now I'm just going to demonstrate the calculation. But later, please do it by yourself in your home. Okay. Or no, you already also in your home. So that's not a correct instruction. Do it outside of the class session. Okay. Okay, so let's see what's the input over here. This is a filtration of calcium carbonate, which will be used in a constant pressure mode. Okay, so remember you have option of constant pressure drop or constant volumetric flow velocity. Okay, I will also write down the formula. Alpha mu per kappa square A V dV 0V is equal to P1 minus P2 dt. Okay, so that's the initial formula. So the delta P, okay, that's delta P. And then the filter area of the plate and frame press was 0.0439 square meter. Okay, so that's the A provided. Slurry concentration was CS 23.47 kilogram per cubic meter. Okay. Okay. So it has to be converted first. The CS cannot be directly linked to this initial formula. It has to be converted to constant called K, okay, which will be provided in the next slide. And calculate the constant alpha and Rm from the experimental data. Okay, so that's actually the one that being asked because they provide the profile of the experiments, volume over times. Okay, so the time that can be provided from this table. Okay, so from this table it is provided for the time, and then the same time it will be provided for the VDV parts. Okay, so the one that we don't have the alpha, and the Rm. And mu, do I have the mu? I think I should have the mu. Okay, the mu is known. Okay, mu will be later known. So the mu will be provided as a typical viscosity of water. So it's stated as 8.937 times minus 4 Pascal second. Okay, so the mu is actually provided. A is provided. Kappa is not provided. Okay, kappa is being asked. So that's the questions. Any questions first before I go to the solutions?
It's okay, sir. It's clear.
Okay. So first, the data are calculated as T per V, okay, and tabulated in table 14.1. So I will go to the Excel later. Okay, the data are plotted as T per V versus V. Okay, and the intercept is determined. So initially you have this value, okay, from 0 to, so initially at 0 the V is 0, of course. 4.4, then you start to get volume of the filtrate up until the last operation at 107.3, okay, which nets you this amount of volume. So we have how many data? 10 data. So go to the Excel to plot this T and V, T and V. Okay. So yeah, that's the data. That's the data. 10 inputs of T and 10 inputs of V. Okay. Then we have to fit with the correlations that we will use later. Okay. In this case, it's what we want to find is the gradient, because once we get the gradient, we can revert it back to the formula. Okay, so what we have now is the x-axis. Okay, sorry. So, oops, what happens? So, yep, the x-axis, that's the V. So directly without any conversion. And the y-axis is T per V. Okay, y-axis is T per V. T per V, that means, well, you just have to link the times divided by the V. So what's the purpose over here? Once you plot it, you will realize that it's actually like a straight line correlation. Usually you have y is equal to mx plus c. Okay. So now what you have is the y, right, equal to m times the v plus c. Okay, and now we just have to revert it back. What does this mean? T per V times m times v plus c. Okay. And the number is actually provided over here. Okay. So based on those number, now I know that the C is actually 6782.03 and the M is 2889. Well, that's not point, that's million. Okay, that's not. Okay, 2 million. Okay, so that's the gradient, that's the constant. Okay, so that's where the number coming from. The number may be a bit different with the solution provided by the book, but well, don't worry too much about that. That's just the data analysis that we use. Okay, so now what we know is, again, that's the intercept. That's our intercept. And the slope is actually Kp per 2. Okay. The intercept, well, they round the number, I think. They just round the number just to make it simpler. So they round the number, the m is equal to Kp per 2 is equal to 3, 10, 6. So the Kp itself is actually 6, 10, 6. Okay, and after we get this Kp value, we can calculate the rest of the variables. Okay. So if you're confused where is this formula coming from, Kp is equal to, so that's the initial formula, right? Kp is equal to mu alpha Cs per square A minus delta P. Okay, so this is actually coming from the resistance in the media. Okay, resistance in the media, the Rm part, because initially when I explains about these initial Darcy equations, we talked about this before. Okay, and the RC part is actually explained coming from the next slide. Okay, that's the RC, the alpha Rossi V per A. That's the Rm. Okay, but the Rm itself is actually can be calculated further using those formula provided in the solution. So this one has not been explained in detail, but this one is the one that we're talking in this example. Okay, the Rm part. So in terms of the formula, yep, that's like the constant for the filter. We know the solid concentration from the equations, and then we know the mu, which is the viscosity of water, and then we know the surface area, we know the pressure drop. Okay, so we know the K from the gradient. Okay, we know the K from the gradient. That's the gradient. So now we can calculate this alpha. Okay, so that's where the alpha comes from. Okay, and the second part is about the constant. The constant in this case is rounded into 6400. Okay, and that's where we can calculate the Rm. Okay, so in this one we can see that the correlation Rm is actually A times B times delta P per mu. Okay, and just now, because we already know the surface area, we know the B from the constant from the regressions, we know the constant delta P, we know the viscosity, so now we can calculate the Rm. Okay, any questions so far about the exercise? Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I forgot to link this equation before. So these two equations should be provided in the previous slide, but that's actually the breakdown of how the filter media resistance is calculated. Any questions? Okay, so the last application about the particles is a fluidization. Okay, and I will say that this is actually the most important one. Of course, we don't have time to finish this third application by now. We have to continue on Tuesday. But I think let me just use 5 minutes to introduce this concept so that in the Tuesday session we can finish the rest of the content very quickly. Okay. So again, this is very important because this will be used a lot when you go into reactor engineering. Okay, when you go into a reactor engineering, which I believe will be even split it. Okay, you have reactor engineering 1, you have reactor engineering 2 in 4th semester, 5th semester. This is very common in the reactor, chemical reactor used in industry. Okay, so there will be a term called fixed bed reactor. There will be another one called fluidized bed reactor. Okay, that very much depends on how the particles behaves inside of the reactor. Okay, in this example, I think this is a fixed bed reactor, just by the look of the equipment. You have reactor in, you have reactor out. In the middle, inside of the reactor, you have a catalyst bed. Of course, you know a catalyst. It is to enhance the kinetics of the reactor. Okay, once you put a catalyst, then the K will goes up, then the reaction rates will goes up. Okay, and again, this is like a very real application in chemical engineering. If I talk about the previous professor before in membrane, Prof. Wenton, we also have a very prominent catalyst professor in ITB. I would say probably the best in the nation, the most recognized one, Professor Subagio, who is very expert in catalyst. Okay, to improve the kinetics of the crude oil into gasoline, or even the palm oil into gasoline, or any other types of products. So again, this is very important for you to understand about the difference of fixed bed versus fluidized bed and what's the different characteristics. We haven't talked about the reaction, that's for the next semester. Now you just have to be able to understand how can I design a fixed bed and how can I design a fluidized bed? How can I make sure? So if it's called a fixed bed, that means the catalyst remains constant. Okay, it's like unmoved. Okay, it's like the gas is the velocity is small enough. The velocity is small enough so that the catalyst will not be uplift into the top of the reactor. Okay, that's why it's called a fixed bed. We just want the fluid to go through the channel. It helps the reactor, it helps the reaction, but the catalyst will not be sent to the top of the reactor. So the keyword here is the velocity has to be small enough. You can imagine when the velocity starts to increase, and what you may have now is maybe you will have some of the lighter catalysts start to almost like a fly, you know, like it's uplift because of the high velocity of the fluid. Okay, so at least be familiar with those two terms here. What's the difference between fixed bed, it's unmoved, versus fluidized bed? It's by design the catalyst to be moved to the top part of the reactor. Okay, so the difference would be the particle may have, well, not may, the particle diameter has a very significant impact on the characteristic. Again, you can imagine the bigger the particle diameter, the harder it is to be fluidized, because we need a bigger velocity to uplift the catalyst. Okay, and there will be some porosity or void fraction. Okay, if you don't have any catalyst, no catalyst, okay, no solid, okay, no solid, that means your void fraction is equal to 1. That means it's completely void. Okay, it means it completely void, completely can be used for the fluid. Okay, the porosity is also 100%. It's completely porous. Okay, now let's talk about the fluid, but the fixed bed. You have a lot of particles inside of this column, and it takes some of the volume of the available volume in the reactor that can be flowed by the fluid itself. If it's like a fixed bed, the porosity will not be 1, maybe in the order of 0.35 to 0.45. Okay, what does that mean? If I use 0.35, that means 35% of the volume can be used for the gas, for the fluid, while the 65% is filled by solid. Okay, 45% over here. 45% is porous, 45% is void, can be used for a fluid, but the 55% is filled by solid particle or catalyst. For fluidized bed, of course, the number will be different. You can imagine between this picture and this picture. Okay, that's a fixed bed. This is a fluidized bed. There will be a bigger space in the fluidized bed because most of the particles already uplift to the top of the column. Okay, so for fluidized bed, maybe I will put it this way at this point between 0.5 to epsilon to 1. Okay, so that's like the range of the fluidized bed. You will get a higher porosity. You will get a bigger void that can be used by the gas or the air or the fluid. Okay, any questions so far? No questions? No questions?
No, sir.
Okay, this is the last slide for today and also the first slide for Tuesday. Okay, but I want you to start visualize the different regimes in fluidizations. Okay, so that's a fixed bed. It's unmoved. Okay, it's unmoved. Of course, what is SF? That's a superficial velocity. What does that mean? That means velocity at porosity of 1, at void fraction of 1. If you flow the gas at a completely empty vessel without any particle, and you measure the velocity in meter per second, that's your superficial velocity. Okay, so if I have case A, the velocity, the void fraction is actually 1. It's unfilled by catalyst, and the normal velocity is let's say 1 meter per second. My superficial velocity will also be 1 meter per second. Okay, because we don't have any catalyst. The epsilon is already 1. Okay, but now if you have case B, where the epsilon, let's say, is 0.4, because it's a fixed bed reactor, it's filled by catalyst, and when you measure at those, so U is at 0.4 epsilon, okay, when you measure the velocity at those real porosity, let's say now it's 1 meter per second, your superficial velocity will not be the same with 1 meter per second. Okay, why? Because during the superficial calculation, it's still assumed to be completely unfilled by catalyst. It will be assumed that the epsilon will be 1. So now you can imagine the difference between epsilon is equal to 1 with epsilon is equal to 0.4. Okay. If you have 1 meter per second, at 0.4, then you use the same flow into a empty vessel. Of course, it's going to be. Do you think it's going to be higher or lower? The bigger the area, okay? The area is bigger. It should be less than 1 meter per second. It should be less than 1 meter per second. Why? Because again, Q is equal to, sorry, no. U is equal to Q per A, right? Meter per second, cubic meter per second, meter. The Q part is the same, okay? The Q part is the same over here. But the A part is actually bigger at epsilon is equal 1. Because all of the area can be used for flow. Meanwhile, in this area, some of them are used to fill the solid. At the same debit, but at a bigger area, of course, now you will get a smaller superficial velocity. But most of the calculation in fluidization, including the Reynolds, will be based on the superficial velocity. Okay, so that's why it's very important to understand the concept of superficial velocity. It is calculated at the basis of porosity of one unfilled column. Most of the equation that will be used later will be used based on this USF, not as the actual velocity. Okay, so for a fixed particle diameter, the smallest USF will get you a fixed bed regime. The smallest velocity will not be able to fluidize the particle. Okay, then you start to get into the minimum fluidization. At higher USF, okay, so that's USF1. Well, than USF1, U1, for example. Now you have U2, which is bigger than U1. The particle starts to uplift. Okay, it has not lifted completely the column, but it starts to float. Okay, it starts to float. So now you have U3, which is bigger than U2. Now you get into the regimes of smooth fluidizations. Okay, now you keep increasing U4, which is bigger than U3. It starts to form a bubble. Okay. Okay, now U5, it starts to form a slug. Okay. U6 at a bigger than U5, flat slug. Okay. And then at U7, but it hasn't left the column. Okay. That none of them has left the column. Okay. At turbulent fluidization, maybe it starts, some of them starts to leave the column by design. Okay, it will be found if you go to any refinery, you will find this fluidized bed column. Okay, it's a very common reactor in oil refinery. And in the most extreme, U8, which is the biggest out of all regimes, all of the solid goes upstairs, leave the column from the top of the column. Okay, so you notice the trend. You notice the trend that to the left part, the USF increase, and also the porosity increase, the void fraction increase. Okay, so the main important part of the fluidization topics is to understand about the velocity. Okay, what is the boundary? Where can I still be able to work in fixed bed? What's the minimum velocity required to start the fluidization? So that's the most important part. What's the velocity? Okay, so that will be explained in Tuesday. Okay, but hopefully you will understand by now the different regimes that will be found in the fluidization. Any questions? I think the time is up. Last question probably, if you still have.
I think it's up to you, sir.
Okay, so I think the time is up, so I will conclude the session. We will continue on Tuesday about the fluidizations, and hopefully we can conclude the fluidization by Tuesday, because if the time is really limited, and we still have one more topic about mixing for next Thursday. Okay. Okay, I will leave the session. See you on Tuesday. Okay, I will always use MS Teams. Okay, so just go to the channel before the session.